Good evening. Welcome to the NN Journal hustings for the Oundle by-election. This evening we're joined by candidates from three of the main parties in the area. They are Harry James from the Labour Party, Charlie Best from the Liberal Democrats and Kate Jones from the Greens. Unfortunately, the Conservative candidate Ollie Curtis didn't respond to our invitation this evening, so we do not have a representative from the Conservative Party. However, we've got some really good questions that have come in from local residents. So we hope that this evening will be informative and interesting. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to answer their question, and Sarah will let each person know when their time is up. So we'll just move straight into the first question we've selected. Is being on the edge of the county, Oundle often feels forgotten about. How will you ensure that Oundle gets the right consideration it should? If we could start with you, Charlie, please.
Okay. Yeah, obviously with the transition to North Hants Council, Oundle is on a limb geographically as well as population-wise. You've got the three big towns, which clearly are going to dominate things in terms of needs and in terms of funding. But we do have our own issues here, and we do pay council tax, so we deserve a slice of the pie, if you like. You know, people like, it's convenient to think that Oundle and the villages don't have any problems. Lots of people living in nice big houses, but it's not like that, as we know. You know, a more rural area has its own problems. We have dreadful public transport, for example. You know, we have one bus an hour if you want to get to Peterborough or Corby or Kettering for a hospital appointment or to catch a train. You know, we've essentially got one doctor's surgery for the whole area. If you don't have a car, how do you get to your doctor's appointment? And those are big deals. You know, in Oundle itself, we'll talk about development later, but we do have our problems. We pay our council tax and we deserve our slice of attention. What we need to do is define those problems carefully, prioritize them, and keep pushing them. Yeah. Define the problems in objective terms, not emotional terms, so that anyone we're putting it to or making requests of can understand them and how serious they are. I think, you know, talking about doctors and primary care, I think something's really important. The Conservatives on their leaflet talk about the Boris Hospital, which is coming. Personally, I think the Boris Hospitals are like a lot of other promises around levelling up. I don't think they're going to materialise. There's no information on when it'll be built, where it'll be built, who's going to staff it, how it's going to be paid for. And I think what we're missing is some real focus on primary care. So doctors, surgeries, community hospitals, and then obviously social care to keep people out of hospitals. And they're every bit as relevant to Oundle and the villages in this ward as they are to the towns.
Great, thank you, Charlie. Kate, could you go next, please?
Okay, so similar ideas really. So Oundle, we are out on a limb geographically, but we are still really important. And I think sometimes Oundle kind of probably it's quite a wealthy in some areas town, village town or rural town that kind of gets forgotten. The idea like it's the jewel of the crown of Northamptonshire in the outskirts, but actually there are issues, and there are issues that need to be dealt with, especially thinking about the local area and keeping local people in that area. So affordable housing, especially if we think about services that are available to us, there are problems with the doctor's surgery. There are massive problems that we've all probably experienced at times. So identifying those real problems, especially when we think about young people as well and the access to services young people have. I think there is a limit, quite a big limit, because of our rural location. It's something that we could focus on. So we pay the taxes, it should be there, and it's really making sure that you raise, whoever takes the role, that they raise those points and they listen to that local our local area, so from Kingscliff all the way over to Oundle, and we consider all of the issues that are there and put them with plausible answers, ultimately with possibilities that can be achieved, I think is really important, and putting them forward so that we can see it in our communities.
Brilliant, thanks, Kate. And Harry?
Yeah, obviously, you know, a lot of similar points there. Northamptonshire as a whole is growing. However, in our part of the world, we've seen the growth, but we've not really seen the improvement of public services to match. Interestingly, our part of the world, our part of the county, is expected to see the third highest population increase throughout the whole of Northamptonshire by 2030, only behind Corby and Kettering. So with that in mind, really, it's crucial to make the case for better local funding in the round for the ward as a whole. Obviously, this means, retaining our existing services, but also championing the reinstatement of other services which have been mentioned before. Bus routes, particularly in the villages. I live in Kingscliff and we've not had a bus route here for about 12 years. For a lot of our villages, we're reliant on the Call Connect service, which is a dial-a bus service essentially. Bank branches as well in Oundle, and post office as well, with that throughout the villages really. We're where we're located, we're on the boundaries of a lot of different counties, and we've sort of looked kind of wistfully at those other counties that have got their services and got their sort of local services in place. Yet here in Northamptonshire, we've really not sort of seen that, and it's been cut. And so yeah, just to sort of on the same page as we're all sort of local candidates, we've seen what's happened and seen sort of the decades of cuts that have come down the line, certainly of local funding as well. So yeah, all in all, just better local funding for sort of the top end of Northamptonshire.
Brilliant. And the next question says, what would you like to see Fletton Fields become, and how do you think this can be achieved? If we could go to Kate first this time, please.
Okay, so I often use Fletton Field actually. And when I moved here 3 years ago, it did take me a while to realise it was there. And I think probably that might be the same with some people in Oundle. But it is such a fantastic green space, which has so much potential. And I know the Save the Fletton Field campaign and that group did some really good ideas and some great thought had gone into what they think it should be used for. And many of the different things I completely agree with, okay? In Oundle, there is a lack of green space, which is available to all. I mean, there is walking out in the rural outskirts, but that's not accessible for disabled, for the elderly, especially if you think about young children and community groups that could be able to use it. So I think ultimately it needs to be used as a place where everyone has sort of some ownership over it. So whatever age you are, that you can go to it and you can enjoy it in different ways. So whether that is local scouts, brownies, those groups, okay, for children, for the elderly, or for groups that are involved outside, so green gardening clubs or allotments. I think when we look at being in a rural area, sometimes it's quite good to reflect at what urban cities have done. And there is amazing gardens, like urban gardens, that have got so much great use and good for physical and mental health. And I think that Fletton Field could offer that great opportunity. I know that there is some sort of more secured funding now, and there's ideas going ahead. So it would be nice to see it being used more regularly, but there needs to be, I think, from Northampton Council, some more money being put into it so it becomes a usable friend space a bit quicker, and ultimately so that everybody could use it and continue to enjoy green spaces around Oundle.
Brilliant, thank you. And Harry?
Yeah, so I've seen the plans for the Fletton Field Association have put forward in their sort of transformation of Fletton Field, which looks really good. It's a really good proposal, which ranges from sport and recreation to bedded garden area. It's a very much a diverse green space which can cater to everyone.
Sorry, have we lost Harry there, I think? Maybe Charlie, would you be able to just come in now and then we can go back to Harry? Hopefully his connection will come back.
Sure, and I'll keep it short because Fletton Field should become exactly the vision that the Fletton Field Association has for it. I've kind of followed the story of Fletton Field from when I was on town council here, and North Hants county councillors was there, not East North Hants, wanted to sell it for building. And we tried for village green status, but we didn't achieve it. But what the Flettonfield Association have done is fantastic. They've got a great vision. The website and video that they've done is pretty inspiring. The problem we have, or that they have at the moment, is securing the ownership of the field, because its ownership, as I understand, has been transferred to North Hants Council, who I'm guessing will still want to sell it for building, money being tight. But councils can't keep selling their assets to fund revenue items. It's like selling the family silver. So the big struggle at the moment is securing the ownership, getting it transferred either over to Oundle Town Council or to a trust to get it safe. And then the people in the Flettonfield Association, everybody else who supports it, can move forward with the plans they've got for it. And, you know, whoever ends up as councillor for Oundle should champion that cause, because it's what the people here want.
Brilliant. Hopefully Harry will be able to reconnect shortly. We'll just move on to the next question in the meantime. And that is, do you think it's important for the Oundle candidate to be local? And what benefits do you think that being local brings? And sorry, could we start with Kate, please?
So I think it is really important to be local, because we are representing, or whoever it is will be representing, this local area. And if you live within it, I think it allows you to understand the needs and necessities a little bit more. So yeah, I definitely think it really helps being local, but also listening to local residents and understanding what they feel that they need, that what services they require, what they need, and how that is reflected then at sort of the council level. As a resident, okay, and as someone who lives there, I've got young kids, I experience on a daily basis all like the trials and tribulations of traffic and issues that are surrounding that. I think you become a lot more aware of the opportunities that there are, and so we should think about possible solutions, but not worry about change too much, because change is inevitable. And I think living there, we can see change, and by living within the environment, we can see change that could take place. Obviously, it's not just Oundle though, we've got to remember that, haven't we? Okay, it is the surrounding villages, and I think they're important as well to consider. So not necessarily just Oundle, but within the local area is important.
Brilliant. Hi Harry, good to have you back. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
We were just talking about the importance, or whether it's important, that the candidate is local, and what benefits it brings to be local. Have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, sorry, internet in the villages is yeah, can be a bit patchy. That's another issue for another day. But yeah, it's imperative that we have a local councillor, you know, someone from this area. See, the key benefit of that is having a local representative that knows in depth, you know, what goes on within the area. There's also the case from a logistical point of view as well, such as travelling around our ward, because as we're all aware, our council ward is very, very big. It, you know, goes as far north as Easton on the Hill, and as far west as Haringworth and Wakeley. So yeah, there's, for a lot of reasons, really, just for principle, but also for logistics as well.
Brilliant, thank you. And Charlie?
Yeah, I think as the other two said, to me it's essential, and I struggle to understand really why anybody who doesn't live in a community would want to represent us as councillor. I have some ideas, but they don't seem good reasons to me. And in fact, one of the things that drove me to stand this time as a candidate was the thought that there might be a third Conservative councillor claiming to represent me who didn't even live here, and that doesn't seem right. I think there's another angle to it as well. Obviously, you're in the community. I've been here 26 years. You know a lot of people, you know a lot of problems yourselves, you get to hear about the problems. But I think for somebody who is a councillor, it also enforces a degree of accountability, because you're doing a job for people you live with and meet with and socialise with every day. And that puts some pressure on you. You don't want to be that councillor living in your community who didn't fix that problem, or who didn't attend meetings. And I think that's quite important. You know, this isn't a job per se, but it is an obligation, and you do get some expenses for it, and you should work hard as a councillor. And I think if you actually live in the ward, that adds that degree of accountability to the people you live with, and I think that's important.
Thank you. The next question is, do you think that Oundle is becoming overdeveloped? And if so, what infrastructure changes do you think the town needs? Harry, could we start with you, please?
Yeah, so with this one, I feel that it's sort of a careful balancing of the nationwide need for housing, in particular for affordable housing, particularly in our part of the world. And then on the other side of that, the added pressures that development brings to schools, to health and social care, and to highways, congestion being one of them. One thing I wouldn't oppose development for the sake of it, but one caveat I like to put in there is if developers wish to build in the area, then they must be held to their Section 106 agreements and implement the changes that are needed to support the growth. We can't just have situations where they bonk a huge estate somewhere and then don't fund things like schools, GP surgeries, adding bits and pieces like traffic calming measures with the added sort of road usage. And that's certainly an issue which we would see in our area. One example obviously would be the housing estate the development proposes development to the north of Oundle, just opposite the new primary school. Around there would be ideal for traffic calming measures. And yeah, see, we need to basically use this any potential money that we'd get from the developers to really to fund the areas which they're going to be developing in, so we get that supported growth in the long term.
Great, thank you. And Kate?
Yeah, so I agree a lot with what you've just said. In terms of, yes, development does have to take place. It does happen to happen, especially when we think about the housing shortages, and especially in Oundle, we think about affordable housing. I know firsthand from chatting to different people that have had to leave or move away from the area, that don't want to leave the area just because of the lack of affordable housing that is available to them. And I think that's really important. And change can be a good thing, but if it's done the right way. So supporting, ensuring that the developments are, in my view, that we are ensuring that they're green developments, okay, that developments that are taking place, we're trying to think about material they're using, and we don't want to increase flood risk in certain areas, okay, we want to try and capture carbon as well as we can, okay, if we're thinking more of a global scale as well. We have the ability to make those changes, and trying to be affordable at the same time, okay, but ensure that take place. In terms of infrastructure, yes, there obviously are going to be areas where the infrastructure doesn't quite fit all these developments, but can we use the development money, use some of that money to ensure that the infrastructure that is put in place is encouraging perhaps other forms of transport, and encouraging and is available for bus services, cycle lanes. There is one that's going in at the moment, but it seems a tad pointless because we're not going into town, for example, in Oundle. So there are areas where there could be definitely improvement within it, but unfortunately, yes, development does need to take place, but let's control it and do it in the right places.
Thank you. And Charlie, please.
Sure, I'll try to repeat points the other two have made, which are perfectly valid. So is it being overdeveloped at the moment? Probably. And yes, it's outstripping any infrastructure improvements, which are minimal. Harry's point about Section 106 is bang on. You know, it's the one lever you've got to get some money out of a developer to make some real differences. And developers want to build here because it's a nice place and they can sell houses fast and at high prices. Doesn't stop them building houses to the lowest standards, which is something else that needs addressing. Houses should be built to the highest standards, not just construction, but energy. But developers need to be made to pay if they want to build here. And a great example is the St. Christopher's Drive scheme, which got outline approval last year, where there is an opportunity to rid the town of one of its long-standing problems by extending Herne Road, where Prince William School is, down to the A605 with some traffic lights. As anybody who's been here probably knows, twice a day you get a tidal wave of coaches and buses and cars as people go to and from the school, and all that is down a cul-de-sac which has to be accessed through some of the smaller roads in the town. So that's a real significant improvement to infrastructure and a resolution problem which could be and should be negotiated as part of that development. The other thing I'd say is, again, you know, I don't want to Tory bash, but they put out leaflets about being vocal on opposing unwanted development. The key thing here is not words, it's not being vocal, it's what you actually do. And the All Conservative Planning Committee continues to pass and approve those unwanted developments. And even today or yesterday at North Northants Council, they were trying to get a motion through which would limit public speakers at planning meetings to one person. Now, how are you supposed to show the level of objection there is to a scheme when only one person can speak is absurd. But I think it's another sign that big money and big developers increasingly are going to have, you know, they want their way. And at some point, something has to be done about that.
Thank you. The next question says, if you were elected, what would your priorities be for Oundle? Kate, can we start with you, please?
I think key priorities is to ensure that we do keep green spaces and that Flettonfield is given that funding, that development that does take place is done sympathetically with the environment and in the right places. Talking about that Herne Road, like there is so many areas where infrastructure is not up to standard to keep it safe. So it is ensuring that it's done in the right places and ensuring that we champion ultimately and ensure that that goes through at the county level. For me also to ensure that the services in the community continue, especially after COVID, when there seems to be a lot of services that have gone into decline and not returned, whether that be within like the childcare sector. At the moment, the library seems the hub of potentially anything that happens in those services. And there are facilities that are available, like the Shore Start Centre, which is next to it, which is just not used, and funding seems to have been gone, especially from services like that are based in Kettering. So I think there's lots of elements that could be improved on that and ensure that funding be put into them, and also that we do support the climate emergency and see what we can do on a local scale to help improve then global issues.
Great, thank you. And Charlie, please.
Yeah, we've talked about a lot of the things that we know need doing. A personal bugbear of mine is the state of the pavements. I know people complain about potholes on the road, but we put a survey out to residents about 18 months ago, and I was amazed how many people commented on the state of the pavements. And when you actually look down, it's like, it's right. You know, some of them are in a dreadful state. I had a friend who's perfectly able-bodied walking down to town, twist his ankle on the pavement between here and town. The council have no planned maintenance. They react to the fix my street posts that people can put up, or don't, because there are about 50 up there that haven't been addressed. So that's one thing that needs looking at. I've talked about Herne Road connecting with the A605. That's a big deal, as is the whole traffic flow strategy around the town. It hasn't changed as the town's grown. We've got cars parked both sides of the road, with cars and trucks trying to get through, and that just doesn't make sense. There are simple solutions could be put in place for those problems. Electric vehicle charging, not for visitors, but for residents who live on streets where there is no off-street parking. What are they going to do in a few years' time when they're told they can't have their internal combustion engine car? Where are they going to charge them? Police presence, okay, we don't have a lot of crime, but there is some low-level crime, and there is, I believe, a growing drug problem in Oundle, and it may be the same in Kingscliff area, I don't know. And that needs sorting out. And the other thing we've talked about is having the right housing in the right places, affordable housing for individuals, for young families, but equally suitable retirement housing for the aging population, so they can move out of their 3 and 4 bed family homes, vacate those for people who need them, and move to something more suitable.
Great, thank you. And Harry, please.
Yeah, Yeah, just reiterating a lot of those points. Yeah, particularly with regards to what Charlie said around crime. See, in our ward, it's, there'd be a common conception to say that, there is sort of a low level amount of crime, but see, crime does happen, particularly with break-ins at shops and just an opportunistic kind of crimes, which do happen quite a lot, mainly because of where we're situated. Police response times are going to be a lot longer. So there's sort of soft targets in a way. One of another key priorities would be improving the access to GP services within our ward. Because we were in Northamptonshire, but we come under the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Health Authority, we're kind of caught in a sort of a no man's land of various, trying to access services one side in Corby to others in Peterborough. Additionally, on the topic of GP surgeries and that, in my own village of Kingscliff, there's very much a surge to try and keep the village surgery open. Any closure or reduction of these services are just going to add more pressure to an already stretched system. So there's quite a few priorities, but that would certainly be one of my key priorities, the most pressing immediate one with regards to health and social care.
Brilliant, thank you. The next question says, how will you pursue openness, transparency and accountability within council committees and in respect of officers' actions, especially in light of the recent £4 million compensation award from council taxpayer funds? Will you urge that those responsible for the actions leading to apologies and compensation be pursued to recover taxpayer money? This question is referring, of course, to the Snooty Fox pub landlord scandal, which I'm sure we're all familiar with now. Charlie, could we start with you this time, please?
Sure. I guess you imagine what controls and discipline is like in a council. And for me, I expect to be somewhat close to what I experienced in over 30 years in industry. But the revelations that come out tell you it clearly is not. The other thing that came out recently is that Northants Council isn't quite sure how many people even work there. So you can imagine the scope that gives people for mischief. The Snooty Fox incident was an example, as I understand it, of someone letting a personal vendetta get out of control. And what amazes me is that whatever approvals took place on the actions there were not stopped by other people in committees or at all. I'm used to having a code of conduct and regular ethics training and a frequent and rigorous audit schedule, not just financial audit, but process audits. And also any significant decisions have to go through an approval process. And the people who approve it have to be prepared to be held accountable for giving that approval. So I'm kind of shocked, but maybe not surprised at these things. And I really hope I get a chance to try and put some of the practices I'm used to in industry and business in the council. The final point, somebody's talking about whether individuals can or should be held accountable and maybe even financially for that. I think the difficulty you've got there is certainly councillors aren't doing a job per se. And I think unless they actually break the law, that's going to be very difficult to impose. Yeah, I'm not sure how we go about that.
Thank you. Kate, please.
Yeah, it's crazy when you learn about it, don't you? Having read about it, because I wasn't here at the time when it took place, that it seems a bit absurd that it got to that stage in the first place. But yeah, being held accountable obviously is key. You are representing, you are using taxpayers' money to make those decisions. So I think, yeah, ensuring then whoever those officers that took that happened with, making sure that they are held accountable. I think obviously it's gone through the courts now, it's hard to pinpoint that on somebody. So I think it's now you've got to take it moving forward that there is clear transparency of how money is spent, where it is spent, and it goes through the right committees, and ensuring that that is put in place. Interesting point, Charlie, about how many people they didn't know who was on the council. It's quite interesting, isn't it, when you hear about that? Obviously the people that are in those roles, ensuring that they're doing it to the right, and as a councillor I guess that's what you're aiming to ensure that they're doing. Sorry, I don't know too much about it. I have to admit, having only just moved to the area, but looking on it seems absurd when you look from a distance.
Brilliant, thanks Kate. And Harry, please.
Yeah, it's a whole remarkable story, sort of £4 million as a result of someone's personal vendetta against someone, you know, decades ago. There's also another important question that we must ask as well, is that why councils only found out about this whole situation, I think, in the late summer of last year, in August of last year. It sort of been just swept under the carpet, and it was only when sort of the media picked up on it, then the council had to come clean. At the moment, talking to our Labour group, they're demanding an inquiry into the whole matter, really, just to try and get to the bottom of this, and to hold those that, you know, that were responsible at the previous council to account. It's just beggars belief, really. And obviously other parts of the unitary authority that had nothing sort of, you know, strictly to do with this are now having to pay that extra money in their bills to fund this. It's just, as the others said, I don't really know what else to say. It's just a crazy situation. But as far as I know, going on, we're being proactive and really just trying to get to the bottom of this at this moment in time, because it's just nonsensical, really, sort of how it's come to this, and how residents now are having to pay the price for that one decision that was made all those years ago.
Thanks, Harry. The final question from local residents is: will candidates pursue resolution of the decades-old issue of the derelict Riverside pub building, which is an eyesore gateway to one of our historic market towns? There are regulations enabling authorities to bring derelict buildings into public ownership and back into use. Why is this not happening, and will you champion getting this issue finally resolved? Kate, could we start with you, please?
Yes, of course, it would be great to see that building back in use of some sort. It is like eyesore, isn't it, as you come into Oundle? I completely agree. I think, yes, championing it, it's obviously hard who the owners, the private investment. It would be great to see it to be used in some sort of community way. Honestly, I don't know too much about the ownership of it, so that would be something I'd need to look up into. But I think if you're going to do that, ensure that whatever redevelopment happens on it, that it is something that is positive to the whole local community, that it is sympathetic to the environment that we live in, and potentially try and make it a carbon neutral development, thinking from a green element. But yeah, moving forward, there are also other areas, though, aren't there, in the town, like next to Festonfield, the old, the name's gone, the old home that is now standing derelict. So some of those other brownfield sites, which would be great to see being redeveloped in a different way too.
Great, thank you. And Harry, please.
Yeah, the quandary that's sort of the Riverside Hotel. I think over the years, I've got the sense that the former East Northants Council were quite lackadaisical in tackling the whole issue. There hasn't really been a positive vision. It's just been left to its own devices. But that's something I'd like to bring to the table, and also point to another example, which is, you know, a similar example which has been resolved in nearby Corby, where there used to be a series of neglected masonettes above the retail outlets in the town centre, which is now the Willow Place, which the then Borough Council brought back into public control. Through that, they're able to regenerate the properties, lease them out as housing, and even convert some of those into businesses. And that was just made possible by having proactive councillors and proactive council. That's something, obviously, you know, under the former East Northants District Council, we just simply haven't had. I think the situation with the Riverside Hotel, where those that own the building They've just been submitting planning applications and withdrawing it. They've essentially just been playing for time. See, that can't be allowed to happen. It just doesn't sort of, it defies logic, particularly as it's their own building and they could be making money out of it. But with the example in Corby, it can be proven that you can take these buildings back into public ownership and they can work for the community and for the local authority as well.
Great, thank you. And Charlie, please.
Yeah, sure. Yes, I'd like to champion this because it's something that not enough has been done on. As you probably know, the real problem with the Riverside is it's owned by a very, very wealthy family. And the reason it's sat disused for so long is because of a family tiff. Siblings have not been able to agree what they want to do with it or who should own it. So here we are, we're sitting with that building, could be a nice building, decaying because a wealthy family have an argument. And that's also the problem with legal action and why the council has been afraid of legal action, because those same very wealthy people employ very wealthy lawyers and barristers who, if you level legal action at them, they will just drag it out forever, and they can afford to do that. I think the approach needs to be a different one. By all means, threaten legal action, but they have the money to deal with that. There needs to be more of a consultation or negotiation with these people to understand the real reason why they've left it as it is, and also to level at them perhaps that if they still choose to do nothing about it, a media campaign might not put them in very good light. So money doesn't matter to them, their image might. But that needs putting together, that approach needs taking, and somebody needs to do some research and try to get things moving there. What it becomes really is not the issue, although a lot of good ideas about what it could become. It just needs to be a kind of shining beacon at the entrance of Oundle.
Great, thank you. Before we wrap up for this evening, it would be good perhaps if you could just very briefly each tell us a little bit about yourselves and why people should vote for you. Harry, would you like to start?
Yeah, so my name is Harry, I'm 27, I live in Kingscliff. Originally I used to live in Newton. I'm very much sort of, wouldn't say born and raised here, but very much raised here. I've lived here for sort of 24, 25 years now. So very much sort of ingrained in the local area. Went to school here, Nassington, Kingscliff, Prince William and Oundle as well. And very much, you know, want to see this area do well. You know, we live in a great area, you know, fantastic, you know, beautiful scenery, so many great things we can do here. And see, if elected, I would just do my very best to champion that and just to make the local area better. There's so much potential here, and over the years it's just, you know, through various different councils and councillors, it's just been sort of left to the wayside. But if elected, then I would really like to just sort of promote this area and make it a really good, you know, amazing place to live, work, study. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And Charlie, please.
Yeah, I'm a retired engineer, lived here over 26 years now. My two daughters grew up here, went through Prince William School. I've done a spell as a governor at Prince William. I've been on the town council. It's my home, I know it well. And like everybody else, I'm frustrated at the relative neglect it's suffered. And I'd like to put that right. I'd also, you know, in my time in industry, I've done a lot in terms of saving money on purchases and improving quality of processes and reducing waste. And I think those are skills that I'd like to bring to bear on the council, and I could hopefully make some improvements there too. So it's a double-edged sword for me. It's serving my community, but it's also maybe using some of my career experience on making some improvements in the council.
Great, thank you. And Kate?
Hello, so I'm a little bit different because I'm new to the area. relatively. We moved here as me and my family 3 years ago, just from Stamford, so not too far, so just a little bit further south ultimately. And I am a geography teacher, part-time geography teacher, and a mum of 3, so quite busy in my spare time. My 3 children currently go to OPS, and I have just really enjoyed living here and sort of fell in love with the area. So I'd really like to give back and think about potential positive improvements that we can see within Oundle and the surrounding area, and keep that positive development. That there are elements, I think sometimes when you're new to an area, you can see a little bit from the outside in, and you can see where the positives are and think about how that improvements can make. I've always enjoyed helping and serving the community that you live in. I think that's really important, to be fully involved with and invested in a community. And I would just like to champion and listen to and get to know the community better to support them.
That's brilliant. Thank you. And thank you all so much for attending. I hope that's been helpful to anyone watching. And if you've enjoyed this event, please do head to www.nnjournal.co.uk for the rest of our political coverage and news from Northamptonshire.